It was supposed to be a quiet, ordinary afternoon. The park was filled with families, joggers, and people enjoying a peaceful break from their busy lives. Birds chirped, kids laughed in the distance, and everything felt calm, almost too calm. Steven Seagal walked slowly along the path, dressed simply, blending in like any other visitor. No bodyguards, no spotlight, no attention, just a man enjoying the moment. But that calm didn't last long. An arrogant park guard suddenly noticed Steven and locked eyes with him. For reasons no one around could understand, the guard's attitude instantly shifted. His posture stiffened. His tone turned sharp. "Hey, you can't be here like that," the guard snapped, stepping into Steven's path. Steven stopped and looked at him calmly. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice steady and respectful. The guard didn't answer the question. Instead, he started making demands, questioning why Steven was there, how long he planned to stay, and accusing him of breaking park rules without explaining which ones. People nearby slowed down, sensing tension in the air. Steven remained composed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply listened, calmly trying to understand what was going on. That calm seemed to irritate the guard even more. The guard's voice grew louder. His words became sharper. He began speaking down to Steven, clearly enjoying the attention and authority. Still, Steven didn't react. That's when bystanders started to notice something unusual, not about the guard, but about Steven. His posture, his confidence, the way he stayed completely in control while being disrespected. Phones quietly came out, not because anyone expected drama, but because something about this moment felt important. The guard mistook Steven's calm for weakness. And that was the biggest mistake of the day. Because what the guard didn't know, what no one there knew yet, was that he was confronting someone who had spent decades mastering discipline, control, and restraint. And in just a few moments, the entire park would witness a situation turn in a way nobody expected. What happened next would leave everyone watching in complete shock. The park guard didn't step back. Instead, he took another step forward, invading Steven's personal space. His voice became louder, sharper, drawing attention from everyone nearby. "I asked you a question," the guard said. "You don't get to stand here and ignore me." Steven met his eyes calmly. "I'm not ignoring you," he replied. "I just want to understand what rule I'm breaking." That answer only fueled the guard's frustration. He began repeating the same accusations, each time with more attitude and less explanation. He pointed toward signs around the park, claiming Steven was violating regulations, but never clearly stating how. People walking by slowed down. Joggers stopped. Parents pulled their kids a little closer. Something about the guard's behavior felt unnecessary, excessive. Steven stayed calm, hands relaxed at his sides, posture balanced. He didn't argue, didn't challenge, didn't raise his voice. His calmness felt intentional, almost deliberate. The guard, however, mistook it for submission. "You think you're above the rules?" the guard snapped. "Everyone has to follow them, including you." Steven nodded slowly. "Of course," he said. "That's why I'm asking for clarification." That was when a few people nearby quietly took out their phones, not to cause trouble, but because moments like this had a way of escalating and people wanted a record of what was happening. The guard noticed, and instead of calming down, his behavior changed. He squared his shoulders, speaking even louder now, as if performing for the small crowd that had formed. His words became more aggressive, more dismissive, as though he needed to prove his authority. Steven noticed the shift, that he glanced around and saw the people watching, not with excitement, but with concern. A woman whispered to her friend, "Why is he talking to him like that?" Another man shook his head. "This feels unnecessary." Steven remained still. Inside, he understood something important. This was no longer about park rules. It was about ego. The guard wanted control. He wanted compliance. And he wanted it immediately. Steven took a slow breath. He chose his words carefully. "I'm willing to cooperate," he said calmly. "But I don't appreciate being spoken to like this." The guard scoffed. "You don't get to decide how I talk." That sentence changed the atmosphere. The tension in the air became heavy. Conversation stopped. Even the sounds of the park seemed to fade. Steven didn't respond right away. That silence spoke louder than any argument. People watching could feel it, the moment when patience meets pressure. Then Stephen lifted his head slightly and said, in a calm, measured tone, "Respect goes both ways." The guard stared at him, surprised. For the first time since the encounter began, the guard hesitated. And in that brief pause, everyone watching sensed something big was about to happen. The guard's hesitation didn't last long. His jaw tightened, and his expression hardened as if Stephen's calm response had challenged his authority. He took a step back, then raised his voice again, louder than before, making sure everyone around could hear. "You don't tell me about respect," the guard said. "I decide what happens here." The words echoed across the path. Stephen noticed people stopping completely now. Joggers paused mid-stride. Families stood still. Even those who had tried to ignore the situation were drawn back in by the rising tension. Stephen remained exactly where he was. He didn't respond right away. He understood something important. Reacting emotionally would only make things worse. So instead, he kept his breathing slow and his posture steady. The guard, however, continued. "If you don't cooperate right now," he warned, "I can remove you from this park." A quiet gasp rippled through the small crowd. Stephen finally spoke. "I am cooperating," he said calmly. "I just want to know what I've done wrong." That answer didn't satisfy the guard. In fact, it seemed to irritate him even more. The guard began listing vague reasons, safety concerns, park policies, authority protocols. None of them clear, none of them specific. His words overlapped, rushed, and sounded less like rules and more like excuses. People watching started exchanging looks. This didn't feel like enforcement anymore. It felt personal. Stephen glanced around again. He noticed the phones raised, the concerned faces, the uncomfortable silence. He knew that every move he made now mattered, not just for himself, but for how the situation would unfold. Then something changed. The guard leaned closer again, lowering his voice just enough to sound threatening without shouting. "You're testing my patience," he said. Stephen's expression didn't change, but inside he made a decision. He wasn't going to walk away in fear, and he wasn't going to escalate the situation either. He chose a third option, standing his ground with dignity. "I'm not trying to cause problems," Stephen said slowly, "but I won't accept being treated unfairly." Those words landed heavily. A woman nearby nodded quietly. A man crossed his arms, watching closely. The guard's confidence started to crack. He took a step back, then forward again, unsure of his next move. His authority had been challenged, not with anger, but with calm, and that unsettled him. For a brief moment, the park fell completely silent. No laughter, no footsteps, no voices, just the sound of tension. Stephen stood tall, not confrontational, not aggressive, just present. His calm wasn't weakness. It was control. The guard felt it, and that realization made him uncomfortable. He raised his voice again, trying to regain dominance, threatening consequences if Stephen didn't comply immediately. But now, the words lacked power. The crowd could sense it. Whatever control the guard thought he had was slipping. Stephen looked around one last time, and then said something that shifted the entire energy of the situation. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect," he said calmly, "no matter who they are." That statement wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it was undeniable. And in that moment, the guard realized something too late. He had pushed this situation far beyond what it ever needed to be. The atmosphere was no longer in his favor, and the next part of the story would change everything. For a moment after Stephen spoke, nothing happened. The guard stood frozen, as if unsure how to respond. His authority had been questioned, not loudly, not aggressively, but in a way that made everyone watching think. That silence changed everything. People in the park began to sense that this encounter was no longer just about rules or control. It had turned into a test of character. Stephen remained still, his posture relaxed but confident. He wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. He wasn't trying to impress the crowd. He simply stood his ground with quiet certainty. The guard cleared his throat and glanced around. That's when he noticed the crowd more clearly. There were more people now, walkers, joggers, parents, even a few park employees standing at a distance. Some were openly recording. Others watched with concerned expressions. Whispers started to move through the group. Why is he talking to him like that? This feels wrong. He hasn't done anything. Stephen heard none of it. Or maybe he heard everything, but chose not to react. Then something unexpected happened. A man standing near the benches leaned toward his friend and said quietly, "He looks familiar." The friend squinted. "Yeah, like I've seen him somewhere before." Stephen didn't turn. He didn't acknowledge the whispers. He kept his focus on the guard, giving him the chance to de-escalate. But the guard, feeling the shift in energy, tried to regain control. "You're causing a disturbance," he said, though his voice lacked the confidence it once had. Stephen responded calmly, "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't broken any rules." That response landed hard. The guard's words didn't match the reality everyone could see. More whispers followed. "Wait, is that who I think it is? No way, it can't be. Look at him closely." Stephen remained humble. He didn't reveal his identity. He didn't mention his name, his career, or his past. He could have ended the situation instantly by saying who he was. But he didn't. Because for Stephen, this moment wasn't about recognition. It was about principle. The guard shifted his stance again. His hands fidgeted. He glanced over his shoulder, as if hoping someone else would step in and take over. The crowd noticed. The balance of power was quietly changing. Stephen finally broke the silence again, not with anger, but with clarity. "All I'm asking for is fairness," he said. "Nothing more." Those words resonated deeply. A woman nearby nodded in agreement. A man whispered, "He's right." The guard opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself. And then, another whisper cut through the crowd. "That's Seagal." It was soft at first, almost unnoticeable, but like a ripple in water, it spread. Heads turned, eyes widened, phones rose higher. Some people looked stunned, others looked confused. A few quietly confirmed it on their phones. The guard hadn't heard it yet. Stephen noticed the change in the crowd's energy, the sudden tension, the disbelief, the growing realization. Still, he said nothing, because he didn't want respect because of who he was. He wanted respect because it was right. And that choice, that restraint, would soon make the situation unfold in a way no one expected. Because once the truth fully surfaced, there would be no turning back. The whispers had spread through the crowd like wildfire. "That's Seagal, the actor, the martial artist." For a few moments, the world seemed to pause. Phones stopped recording in a frenzy of disbelief as people looked back and forth between the calm figure in front of them and the flustered guard. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy nobody could ignore. The guard, however, hadn't caught on yet. His expression was still filled with arrogance, though the first cracks were beginning to show. He looked at Stephen, trying to regain authority, but something had changed, not in Stephen, but in how everyone else saw the situation. The silent witnesses had shifted the balance of power. Stephen took a slow, deliberate breath. He wasn't angry. He didn't raise his voice. He simply adjusted his stance, just enough to show he was present, confident, and unwavering. "You've been speaking to me as if I'm someone who doesn't deserve respect," he said calmly, his voice measured. "I've cooperated. I've followed every request. And yet you continue to act as though your authority gives you the right to humiliate someone." The guard opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. The crowd had grown silent. People were leaning in, waiting for the next word. Phones were still recording, but now with a sense of anticipation, as though everyone knew something important was about to happen. Stephen continued, "Respect is not about power. Respect is about fairness. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what title you hold. How you treat people defines you more than any uniform, any authority, or any title." The crowd exhaled collectively. Even some of the guard's colleagues, standing at a distance, began to whisper among themselves. "He's right. He's completely right." The guard's face tightened. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable. He had intended this encounter to be simple, a demonstration of control, but now the crowd, the whispers, and the calm authority standing before him made him feel exposed. Stephen didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, didn't need to. The truth in his words, combined with his calm demeanor, spoke louder than anything else could. The power of patience, restraint, and confidence had completely inverted the situation. The guard's attempts to intimidate were no longer effective. Every gesture, every word he had tried to use to assert authority now felt hollow, and the more he tried to regain control, the more the crowd noticed his frustration. A few onlookers quietly encouraged Stephen with nods and murmurs. Their respect wasn't for fame. It was for principle, and it was growing by the second. Stephen glanced briefly at the guard, locking eyes without aggression. "This isn't about me," he said softly. "It's about fairness, about treating people the right way, no matter who they are. That's what matters. That's what earns respect." For the first time, the guard seemed to pause entirely. His arrogance was replaced with hesitation, his confidence shaken. Every observer could see it. Even the small children nearby sensed the tension. The guard tried to speak, but his voice faltered. He realized, too late, that the encounter had gone far beyond his control. His attempts at dominance had been silently undermined by patience, integrity, and calm authority. And just as the crowd began whispering excitedly, the realization hit the guard fully. The man standing calmly in front of him wasn't just any visitor. This wasn't about titles or power or appearances anymore. The tide had shifted, and in just a few seconds, the next moment would make it undeniable. The park had gone quiet, almost as if everyone was holding their breath. The whispers that had begun a few minutes ago had grown louder, spreading through the crowd like a ripple. "That's Steven Seagal." "No way," the martial artist and actor. Even a guard finally caught the murmurs. He looked around nervously, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. At first, he thought the crowd was exaggerating. Maybe it was a joke. But as he scanned the faces of those around him, he realized something important. The entire park was watching him, and their attention was focused squarely on the encounter. A fellow park officer approached from his side. He glanced at Stephen, recognition crossing his face instantly. "Sir, that's Steven Seagal," he said quietly, but loud enough for the guard to hear. The words hit like a sudden gust of wind. The guard froze. For a moment, he couldn't speak. His face turned red, a mixture of embarrassment, surprise, and disbelief. Every person watching now understood the full gravity of the situation. The arrogance that had fueled him only moments ago was now gone, replaced by hesitation and uncertainty. Stephen didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to prove himself physically. His calm confidence and composed demeanor had already made the point. The recognition of who he was, a world-renowned actor and martial artist known for discipline and skill, amplified the tension. The crowd began reacting immediately. People whispered excitedly, some raising their phones higher to record every detail. "Did you see his face? He has no idea what he just did. This is insane." Stephen's presence was commanding, but he didn't gloat. He didn't mock. He didn't make the guard feel small. Instead, he stood quietly, letting the moment speak for itself. His calmness contrasted sharply with the guard's obvious discomfort, and that contrast was enough to shift the energy completely. Even the guard's colleagues began whispering among themselves, exchanging looks of concern. Some shook their heads. Others tried to step in, attempting to mediate, but the damage was already done. The power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. Stephen finally broke the silence, his voice measured, calm, and filled with quiet authority. "It's not about who I am," he said. "It's about respect. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly, no matter who they are. That's what matters." The crowd responded immediately. People nodded. Some clapped quietly. Others murmured their agreement. Phones captured every word, every reaction, every subtle moment of the guard's regret. The guard, for the first time, understood the lesson he had been missing all along. His actions, fueled by arrogance and a sense of authority, had been witnessed by dozens of people. The weight of public attention and the realization of who he had confronted left him speechless. Stephen didn't attack verbally or physically. He didn't humiliate. He didn't need to. His restraint, integrity, and calm authority had already spoken louder than any words or gestures could. The park's atmosphere shifted entirely. What had started as a tense, uncomfortable confrontation became a lesson in humility, dignity and respect. People around absorbed the moment, some whispering to friends, others shaking their heads in disbelief, all captivated by the dramatic, yet peaceful, resolution. And as Stephen prepared to leave, the crowd's energy remained charged. They had witnessed not just the reveal of a famous figure, but the power of composure, restraint, and the quiet authority that comes from integrity. The guard, still stunned, finally muttered an apology, not because he wanted recognition, but because the situation demanded acknowledgement of fairness. And in that moment, it was clear the real victory wasn't fame or power. It was the quiet strength of standing firm with respect and dignity, letting the world see the truth unfold. The story of this encounter was about to travel far beyond the park, captured on phones, shared online, and destined to inspire millions. The moment had ended, but its impact was only beginning. People in the park slowly began to return to their routines, but the energy lingered. Phones that had been recording were now filled with hours of footage that could be shared around the world. The story had the perfect ingredients to go viral: tension, restraint, recognition, and a powerful lesson. Within minutes, the first videos were uploaded online. Clips of Stephen standing calmly while the arrogant guard realized who he was began circulating on social media. Comments poured in: admiration for Stephen's calmness, shock at the guard's arrogance, and praise for the way the situation was resolved without violence. The guard, meanwhile, faced consequences for his behavior. His colleagues and supervisors had watched the viral clips. Reports were made, and while the moment had embarrassed him publicly, it also became a lesson about humility and authority. But the focus was not on embarrassment or punishment. The focus was on respect. The focus was on integrity. The focus was on how one person's composure could turn a tense, unfair situation into a moment that inspired millions. People shared the story across countries, cities, and continents. Comments came in from New York, London, Manila, Sydney, and beyond. Fans of Stephen praised his patience. People who had witnessed or experienced similar confrontations share their own stories. The message was clear: calmness, fairness, and dignity speak louder than anger or aggression. Stephen himself did not make any public statements that day. He didn't need to. His actions had spoken for him. Standing firm, respecting the people around him, and refusing to react with anger had sent a far stronger message than any words could. And the lesson went beyond this single park encounter. It reminded people everywhere that true authority does not come from power or aggression. It comes from self-control, fairness, and respect for others. That principle resonated with viewers around the globe, and the story spread like wildfire because it was relatable, emotional, and inspiring. Even the small moments, the whispers, the silence, the brief pause before the guard realized the truth, became iconic. People discussed them online, analyzed them, and shared them repeatedly. Each view reinforced the message: patience and integrity can turn a tense, unfair situation into a lesson in respect. By the end of the day, millions had seen the story. Reactions ranged from shock to admiration. Parents shared it with their children as an example of calm problem-solving. Fans of Steven Seagal celebrated his restraint. And for those who had initially doubted the power of composure, the encounter became a vivid reminder. How you respond in a tense moment defines your character more than the actions of others. The park encounter, brief as it was, had become more than just a story. It became a lesson, a viral moment, and a testament to the power of dignity in the face of arrogance. If you believe respect should always come first, and that composure and integrity are more powerful than anger or aggression, type respect in the comments below. Share this story, inspire someone today, and subscribe for more moments that teach lessons about character, courage, and dignity.